Just answering questions with WAPTech. Several questions in here. Was global warming affected by Panama Canal or the Suez Canal? The Suez Canal may flow north in winter and south in summer, but the net result of flow may or may not really affect it much. It's not a lot of water to move around. And the primary effect by water is A, moving water from a cold water body to a hot water body or vice versa. And this seems to nullify itself out because it's only in one section it does that, and it's mostly from a lake or some other source, and the other one moves with the tides on a daily basis and seems to give a null effect. The other thing that can happen is it causes saline changes. This is between the Mediterranean and an actual ocean. Both of them are salt. It could have an effect, and it does have an effect on plants in the area, and it may have a unintended consequence effect after that point, but the Suez Canal probably has very little effect. There is an anomaly map for temperature changes over the decades, and it didn't seem to show a focal point around it, which you would expect around either the entrances at each end or along the length of it. The Panama Canal, by size, is actually much shorter, and it's based on not being a sea level waterway that freely flows, but being used by pumps and locks using water that normally goes from the mountain ranges or whatever down into the sea anyway. And as long as it has a fairly hefty flow of craft going through, it tends to flow probably the same rate. At least it's not flowing faster than it would be able to do possibly before, but that's only certain sections. So in my opinion, it doesn't really change salinity or temperature by enough to really cause a change. But that's an opinion, and I couldn't find anybody pointing out that this was a big deal or even a deal of any kind that was studied. Maybe it should be. Next, a Canadian neocon starting his channel in 2011. He was into political grindcore bands. He's a fan. Said a friend made a pogue carburetor for his Comet. No specification other than a Comet, so I'll assume it's a vehicle, and I looked up the most common named vehicles named Comet, and I'm going to settle on one of them. And he said, quote, "We drove around all day on it." Okay. How much fuel capacity and what kind of engine do you need without changing anything to drive around, quote unquote, all day? Now, when a person is discussing something based on literally splitting hairs, scientific accuracy, and says something vague like this, let's just get to the point. It's bullshit. It has to be bullshit. Otherwise, you would say, yeah, this is the mileage we got, and this is how much fuel we used. If you're not willing to present that information, I'm going to assume because you left it out, it's bullshit. And it should be treated that way. Now, I'm being insulting for a good reason. Do better. But let's do some basics here. I'm going to use 2019 cars, not the Comet, because he didn't specify what year or even who made it. It might be some weird company that made something called the Comet, so let's... maybe it's the Vomit Comet. 2019 automobiles, 25 miles per gallon average or more. The majority of them had 25 miles per gallon combined. That's not highway rate, but we're going to use 25 miles per gallon because it's a nice round number. Now, gas tank capacities. You could have a 10-gallon one in a mini car, but you can upgrade it. You could have a 20-gallon in a sedan, change it. You could lower it or increase it. And 30 gallons in SUVs and 40-gallon ones in pickup trucks or larger minivans, or all sorts of things. Most of this is based on the idea of refilling it once a day. So they're designed for you not to refill them more than once a day. In fact, you can look that up. Many automakers in North America, because this is Canadian, we have to use North American instead of saying America, design their vehicles so that if you fill the tank in the morning, it'll be full when you refill it the next day. And if you don't want to do it every day, you just get a larger capacity engine, or you do a few upgrades. Or, in some cases, like in the 1970s, we're going to get there in a minute, the vehicle may have a higher efficiency mode of driving, sometimes called economy mode, highway mode, or whatever. And in order to qualify for certain tax incentives, government kickback money, in the 1970s especially, many automakers put out versions of their vehicle that were optimized to get good gas mileage, or really good gas mileage. Some of you might remember some of these penny-pinching cars. And, I mean, they were gutless until you put your foot in it. Basically, at speeds, certain speeds, if you just held the gas pedal still, at that seemingly always neutral point, especially with automatic transmissions, which are kind of a hydraulic computer. Unless you put in your foot, it would read that you were just maintaining speed on flat ground and go into high economy mode. You need 25 horsepower to drive an average sedan down the road continuously. 25 horsepower out of, at the time, 100 horsepower engines were actually quite common. So, for an 8-hour all-day drive, which is what most people mean, that's 480 miles, 60 miles an hour. That would need a 19-gallon tank, maximum, in 2019, with current sedans. So a 20-gallon tank would literally be all-day stock. You wouldn't have to alter anything, and it wouldn't need a vaporizing carburetor. And you can watch people do, if they're being honest, vaporizing carburetors and find out they don't get any better gas mileage most of the time. I mean, sometimes they do, but most of the time they don't. And you have to basically undo the computer, and then this is with the ones that have the computer controls in it trying to get good gas mileage. And you can just reprogram them to be penny pinchers. Ultramilers do it all the time. Look up hacking videos. Ultramiler hacking car. 12 hours would be about 720 miles, I'm guessing at this point. 30-gallon tank would be needed. And a 40-gallon tank if you want to go 16 hours and call that all day. I don't think you're talking about all day being 12 to 16 hours. It's probably an 8-hour day that you drove around 480 miles or more or less, and that would require anywhere around a 19 to 20-gallon tank. And again, that's stock in most sedans, but you can get ones that have 25 and 30-gallon tanks for sedans. You can just buy the bigger one, and they're bolt-on. They don't require any modification. If it was a Mercury Comet, because you didn't specify, that's a 16-mile-per-gallon engine and vehicle combo. But again, that's combined mileage using modern methods, stop-and-go traffic mixed with highway. 16-gallon tank was commonly available on Amazon for replacement or direct replacement, but 20-gallon tanks existed. So you could have a 256-mile range for 4 hours driving time, or it could do a 23 mile per gallon on the highway, which is probably what you were talking about, or you were driving like a grandma and making sure you made all the lights so you didn't waste any fuel, and you'd have a 460-mile range and run for 8 hours without modifying it. You just have to drive it different. Look up Ultramiler before you say you know more than this. So basically, your friend drove around all day on a full tank of gas. Automakers designed their cars for the grocery getter crowd and the go back and forth to work crowd, and they look up the average distance people drive back and forth to work and try to make it to where you can refuel the vehicle once a week or twice a week. But you can go, quote, all day on a tank of gas for 8 hours. 8 hours is the maximum driving time you're recommended to do. And if you look up the distances between fueling areas, they're normally not 500 miles apart, but some of them are. They also look up the maximum distance you could find in the United States between two gas stations, so you could fill it up at one and not run out until you get to the other. They actually think of these things because reality. And yeah, in the 1970s there were fewer fuel tanks, fueling stations, so they might make an effort to make them drive longer. And I do remember I had a Chevy Nova that had been converted into a sleeper. It was a drag racer. It had extremely modified, they modified a few things, and they bored out some pieces of the carburetor to get it to where it would either go into high economy mode, so it would sound, really wimpy. Or if you put your foot in it, I mean, it's a Chevy Nova, it's going to sound kind of beefy if you want to, but when you put your foot in it, like I did when I was trying to get my driver's test, that was a mistake. I found out, it had been modified to be a drag racer, and it laid rubber. So anyway, I didn't get a driver's license that time. My dad and I had to modify the thing. It was fun on dirt, though. Oh my God. So anyway. So yeah, a car driving around all day on a full tank of gas is what you're talking about. How many of you can drive all day, 8-hour day maybe, or a long range ride on 8-hour drive on a full tank of gas? Some of you don't have a car can do it. Some of you do. Pro tip, I recommend you get your car modified to be able to do 8 hours, or we'll call it almost 500 miles on a tank of gas, if you can, because this guy did it with a Mercury Comet most likely, but I don't know if it's a Mercury Comet. Next. On September 11th, around 9:40 a.m., a commercial plane was reported to have crashed into the Pentagon by many eyewitnesses. who saw apparently Flight 77 hit the Pentagon, and at the exact time the radar had seen it disappear around that spot. Someone will then point out that they saw a friend or whatever, or a YouTube video that said completely different things. That's nice. This is a generalization based on another YouTube video you can watch too. That doesn't mean anything. You can look up the actual reports, you can look up the buried reports, but they all have something in common. A need for people to claim the Pentagon could not have been hit by an airplane because that's the hill truthers choose to die on. I did a video about an eyewitness who went under the name of Lloyd England. One of the poles was knocked down by the airplane. One of them, there were many of them, by an airplane flying way too low because it was crashing into the building. Fell over and hit Lloyd England's taxi. And I don't know if you understand taxi drivers and their attitudes about accidents. They don't want to take any blame, and they will claim maximum damage over here and least responsibility. Lloyd England's taxi was hit. He was featured in news reports and such. If 99 people report seeing something like a plane hitting a building or a plane flying over, and one person says something else, the rational people say the plane hit the building because 99 out of 100 people said so. However, conspiracy theorists latch onto the one, our shining example, because they have to immediately, in some cases, demonize or chase down or threaten the other 99. And it's about like that. There was lots of people who saw exactly the same thing that day, and later on, many years later, they might remember differently. Lloyd England was one of those people. He changed his story over time, and the claim is he said certain things during a certain interview, which isn't his voice. And another one was a written account done by a secret whistleblower who talked to him in an alleyway sometime. But Wabtec never mentioned Lloyd England's quote. Quote? Is it an audio-video recording? Yes, there is one. Does he say these things? He came across the bridge with people who helped stage the props on the freeway. The light pole in his cab to make it look like it was a commercial plane that hit the Pentagon. That's not even a complete sentence. I'm hoping I just miscopied and pasted that. Did Lloyd England claim at the time that a telephone pole or a light pole fell over and hit his cab? Because that actually does happen. Sometimes the poles get knocked over or break, and that is an actual claim. It's a piece of infrastructure equipment that fell over on a car. I have witnessed a light pole like that fall over from nothing affecting it. And I've also induced a shake pattern, a resonant shake pattern, and almost snapped one to prove it could be done. And I did it in front of conspiracy theorists because I said, yeah, you can have this happen from wind buffeting effects. That's why they're shaped the way they are, so that they will damp their own vibration. There's a place 5 blocks away from where I lived in Portland when I was living indoors that made these poles. I also lived 3 blocks at one point when I was homeless from the place that made the Razor trains, aka the FEMA trains you guys kept talking about. You had to pick on subjects that I could go directly observe and measure and photograph. That was funny back when I did those videos. There aren't any FEMA trains, you fuckhead idiots. Anyway, next. I didn't mention Lloyd England's quote in the video where I'm debunking these quotes. Wabtec talks about Big Pharma looking at building blueprints. Yes, look up the building blueprints. Don't lie about them. Also, don't misquote the Bible, even though I don't like to talk about it. But anyway, he speaks many words, isn't looking to shed light on any truth. I love that word being used all the time. All sorts of nonsense. More comfortable talking in circle. If you're looking for truth, Wabtec 2 is not the correct channel. No, it's Wabtec. I'm not Wabtec 1, 2, or whatever. These are just the channel names. I just separate them. So again, conspiracy theorists do not look at the literally hundreds of people who saw the plane hit and other people who were almost killed by it impacting. No, it had to be a rocket or a launched missile or something like that. And then they bring up facts about the Pentagon that weren't true. Lloyd England is rumored to have recanted his original story about how his car got hit by a pole that got knocked over by something. He didn't know what happened until afterwards. And you don't bring up the actual quote, you don't bring up the data, and you even misquote yourself by doing this horrible grammar error. I mean, you butchered it. So anyway, to review, the Pogue carburetor didn't do any better for this one guy than having a stock Mercury Comet. I don't think the Panama Canal and Suez Canal could affect global warming. and I don't believe the Lloyd England quote should be used anymore. If somebody wants me to do another video, obviously you do, on the Lloyd England, I'll look up current sources for the data that aren't lying. Let's see how you like that. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that.